Welcome back to Breakfast with Bacon. We're so glad you're going to join us. We have Doug Bacon, managing partner here at Throwing Words, whose last name inspired this series. We have Jay-Z, Julie Zalua in the background, making sure everything's working well. And you have me, Lynn Ingersoll, your host. Today, we have a fantastic guest, Lea Williams, and she is a consultant with Patton McDowell. She recently graduated from UNCC with a PhD and master's in organizational science or organization science, which is a great accomplishment. And you'll see how that ties into her strengths. The reason we started this series was really from what we're learning. As much as we've worked remotely with each other for years, we were surprised at the things we were learning and are continuing to learn. And we hope by sharing what we're learning, you're going to learn something and think about it in your own way. So glad to have you, Lea. And I know you are a consultant with McDowell or Patton and McDowell. So that's wonderful. And I understand that you were curious, being an analytical person, how the the strengths finder and that tool would actually differ between what you thought it was going to be and how it's actually playing out.
Yeah.
So my first question is, what's been the difference and how's that showing up for you?
So first I want to say thank you guys so much for having me. I'm honored to be a guest. And you know, the Strengths Finder was really interesting. I was so thankful to Doug for offering to do it for me and for coaching me through it. And I think it was one of the situations where I actually didn't have a ton of expectations going in, which is not like my strengths, which I'm sure we'll talk about in just a minute, but I didn't really know what to expect. I think the academic in me has been used to kind of the big five personality that we talk about in research all the time. And I was thrilled to have the opportunity to take StrengthsFinder and see how my strengths, come across in that platform. So one thing that was surprising to me was, and I know that you guys have talked about it with other guests, how we instantly look at what our strengths look like in Overdrive. So the analytical person in me was like, okay, great, yes, positives. Oh gosh, what are the potential negatives here? So that was surprising that, I instantly went to that. But then it was great to have Doug coach me through how these can play out both my strengths and how things can look in Overdrive. So I was really thankful to have not just reading it on paper, but how does this actually look for me and how does it shape my job search, which is now over, thankfully, as you said. So some surprising things for sure.
So now that you're really paying attention to your strengths, one of the things I notice is often we're not aware of our strengths because they're just our strengths and it's just the way we are. So now that you're paying more attention, is there an example or something that surprised you that you can say, oh, I can see that now where you didn't before?
Right. So I think when I was talking about potentially getting this job that I have now with Pat McDowell and Associates, my analytical in me was thinking, and I talked to Doug about this, and it was a really big coaching moment for me. Okay, I've got this opportunity, but I need to consider all my other opportunities and maybe should I keep looking? Because, the analytical person in me is in overdrive, wanting to meet a deadline, wanting to achieve what I set out to achieve, which Doug and I have talked about several times. So that was a moment where I did take a step back, kind of think about whether this is the right move for me. It turned out that it was, but it was really helpful for me to have that knowledge about myself and to really take a step back, which in my prior life, prior to doing StrengthsFinder, I might not have kind of taken that moment to really think about, why I was leaning that way, and having my strengths, I realized why that was happening.
Great. It really is awesome to start paying attention and going, oh, I see that now. Doug, so what's your take on all this?
Yeah, so two stories, but the first is just kind of how Lea and I connected, right? So Lea, we connected through LinkedIn, and so she had done her research and she had seen in my background and my experience the work that I had done previously in consulting with nonprofits. One of the cool things about Lea is that so she's been in school forever, but undergrad at Davidson and then 7 years at UNC Charlotte. And so she had, but in through the particular UNC Charlotte opportunity, she was able to do some projects both in the for-profit and in the nonprofit sector, and just got really clear about what her passion was. And her passion really is about, equipping nonprofits with data to then make decisions and act on those. And she says it much better than I do. But
perfect.
you can really see the kind of those strengths come out in terms of both that learner and analytical, in terms of spending 11 years in school and kind of thriving in that environment, but also some of those relational talents as well in terms of the people side of things. And then you sprinkle in all that high achiever, which is, been making it happen for lots of years. So it's really kind of a cool combination to see, to just kind of be open to things. I mean, it's not a lot of people, I don't get a lot of people reaching out to me through LinkedIn to connect, and then we had our first conversation, and when I mentioned the, our Making Meetings Work app and new capability we're rolling out, we're able to kind of, that kind of spoke to all of Lee's expertise. So we've been able to plug her in there. So just kind of great to see that how that combination of strengths really is showing up, and for your benefit, but also for all those organizations that you're working with.
Thank you.
Well, Doug, I also believe you have an interesting story that really highlights how Lee's strengths interact with your strengths. Would you share?
Yes. So it's one of my favorite stories. So again, Lee and I, met, I guess, April or May. And so, but since then we've had a lot of conversations, and she's been involved in some of our planning around the Making Meetings Work. And so we did coaching and those kind of conversations. And so fast forward to 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were preparing for a meeting, a conversation we were going to have with a client. And so we planned for that. And then she's like, oh, and by the way, you actually pronounce my first name, which is spelled L-E-A. You actually pronounce it Lee, so like L-E-E. So she let me go at least 4 months. Never corrected me or anything. And so when I looked at her strengths, I was like, it made perfect sense. It's so interesting because, Lee has an interesting combination of woo, so winning others over and never met a stranger, but also relator, which is drawn to go deeper, but they go deeper with fewer people. And so could see how she was really leveraging these different strengths to decide if the relationship was worth going deeper. And then once she decided that I was worthy of a deeper relationship, then it would be important that I would call her by the right name. So that's when she told me that. So, but I'm sure, Lee, you have another perspective on that. Would love to hear that.
It's so funny because the part of me is, I guess it's the woo. I mean, you can tell me better than me, not wanting to correct somebody, because it's truly not something that bothers me. Lee, L-E-A, is often read in emails and Facebook and everything as Leah. So I've been dealing with it my whole life. And Leah is, I think it's a lovely name too. So it really doesn't bother me at all. So the part of me is, as soon as I tell somebody that, they feel bad because they've been pronouncing my name wrong. Whereas I'm like, no, you're just reading my name as it's written. And so it's me not wanting to make somebody feel bad when they've truly done nothing wrong. So that's what I wanted with you, to not feel bad. So I've kind of taken the approach recently of, I pronounce my name Leah, or I pronounce my name Lee. And even though it looks like Leah, I don't want to say, you actually should pronounce my name Lee instead of Leah. So I think that's something that's really been more in tune for me since we've done StrengthsFinder, and since you and I have had these conversations, which has been another interesting tidbit that has come up as well.
Yeah, because you also have Harmony, right? So that Harmony wants to reduce conflict, wants to avoid conflict when it gets into overdrive. And so I could see how you've had these past experiences of that when you your name, and then they immediately feel like they've done, that how could I have missed it, or they're feeling bad about that. And that kind of dings that harmony, but also hitting that woo and communication, positivity, all of that as well. And just, I could see how just over time with your analytical, like you could again boil that down to its essence, right? And it's like, oh well, I don't want people to feel like they've done something wrong, but at some point, they do need to be calling me. If it's something that matters, then they should call me by the name. Because my follow-up question to Lee was, well, how long did your husband call you by the wrong name when you were dating? But she said she clarified that in the beginning. So, but anyway.
You were going into a new job. How is being more aware of your strengths? How is that going to help you? How is that helping you already? So, Lee, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Definitely. That's a great question. So it was the perfect time for me to take StrengthsFinder when I did, because Doug was able to help me through that process right before I took a new job. It was when I had finished my doctorate and was on the job market, but hadn't yet found my current role at Pat McDowell & Associates. And it was truly the perfect time to take it, because I learned about myself, and it helped me really consider the pros and cons of several opportunities that I was considering. And the analytical person in me would have just, put my mind to, I want to be a nonprofit consultant. The first offer that I get, I'm going to take it. And Doug really explained to me, maybe in overdrive, that I could tend to do that without stopping to take a moment to think for myself, whether that's the right move for me. It turns out that it was. And then the woo in me has really, I think, helped in my new consulting role, having to do lots of Zoom meetings during this time and trying to, really relate to people, and building those relationships is really important as a consultant. I'm speaking to the choir here, I know, but that's been really key as I start this new role. And it's not something that I really had to do in grad school. In grad school, I was really doing my own research. Of course, I had to have great relationships, and that's important to me as a human, but building relationships and following up with people as a consultant is really important in my new role. So being aware of that has been really key.
So you're like a twofer. You're getting the benefit of StrengthsFinder moving into a new role. And I'm curious, you mentioned that your thesis was based on during meetings, what triggers or prompts people to multitask. If you reflect now, knowing what your strengths are, is there something that you notice now in doing all that work that you had to do to get to your thesis that really helped you complete that assignment?
Oh, that's definitely the analytical part in me. I mean, needing to be super deadline driven, needing to focus on doing whatever it takes to finally finish that dissertation, as it's a multi-year process. So, and also literally doing analytics. I think that was, both the achiever and the analytical. I know that those are both in my top 10. So needing to play on both of those strengths to get me through was really, it was a long time in school. So I think that's really what it came down to.
Great. Well, Doug, I know one of the things I struggle with clients and StrengthsFinders, they always love it. They think it's great. And then they're like, okay, now what do we use this for? So especially with Lee going into a new job and really reflecting on how she accomplished her schoolwork, what thoughts or what suggestions do you have for organizations to really make sure that they're able to let people use their strengths every day?
Yeah, I think the big thing is so most people are introduced to it in some kind of team building. We do the top 5 for our team, and we get together, we talk about it, and it's kind of like a fireworks show, right? It's like, oh, look, hey, you're harmony, or you're achiever, or maximizer, or whatever, and then they kind of go back to the work, and it gets put on the shelf or whatever. And fast forward 6 months or 8 months, I'm like, hey, oh yeah, strengths, right? Yeah, you're that realtor or whatever that one is, or what, there's no impact in that. And so what I found, a couple of things that can kind of help make it stick. One is having a coaching conversation, and it doesn't have to be with a certified coach, but sitting down with the manager and just talking about both kind of the strengths and where you get the best of me or the worst of me, and kind of applying the strengths to thinking about their role and the so what of that. So if I'm somebody who has lots of critical thinking, the strategic thinking themes, and maybe like also mix in some like a deliberative with intellection or analytical or context, some of these strengths that are more slower than fast, then, you know, my manager can be able to can help me be successful by giving me time to think. And so sharing with things in advance, as you see that, you know, with that tension that can show up between among teams and between individuals, because of, you know, somebody's more in the moment, spontaneous versus thoughtful, reflective. And if they don't know that about each other, it's just a source of tension and friction. And so one, kind of being aware of, you know, how these strengths are showing up for me in my day-to-day work is one. And you can, oftentimes you can look to the past and identify a success and see how your strengths really showed up in that success. And then that second thing would be having this conversation with your supervisor about strengths and what's the so what between the two of us. So there are a couple ideas of how folks are kind of making it stick, and then the other is just repetition. You know, some organizations will do a strength of the week where they'll spotlight one employee who will talk about their strengths. You know, so that it's kind of coming back up over time.
I love that, where you talk about here's what happens when I'm at my best, and then here's what happens when I go into overdrive, because those two awareness portions can really help us work much better as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great, wonderful to have you again, Lee, and good luck in your new position. We'll have to have you back, you know, 6 months, a year down the path to just see how things are going. And Doug, thanks for the suggestions for all the folks out there that love Strengths Finders and sometimes just run out of steam on how to put it into action. So get out there, put your strengths to action, pull out that top 5. If you've done all 34, pull it out, take a look, see how you can apply it today. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.
Thanks.
Yep.